Please join me in welcoming the one and only Barkha Dutt.
A lot of my leadership lessons have been borrowed from real life. Going to Kargil for me was a masterclass that courage and strength is not the absence of fear and trauma. You are not a leader if you don't upset a few people sometimes. So, okay, the way I want to do this and the way I prefer to do this is to keep it very interactive. We're here to talk about a very broad word called leadership. In particular, looking at women in leadership, but also looking at all kinds of leadership and communication, right? And what I want to do is, I don't want to structure this in a way that I talk and then we have a Q&A. If at any point you feel like you want to jump in, ask a question, comment, share an experience. So, this dialogue doesn't have to be constructed in a formal question and answer way. You might want to just stand up and tell me a story about yourself or something you've experienced or something that's obstructed you or something that's helped you. So I think the whole idea is to create that kind of very open conversation. So we'll have questions and comments from the floor throughout the time that I'm going to be with you. And so really keep it interactive, keep it informal, even in terms of language. Would you prefer I speak in English, Hindi, a mix? Anyone? Okay. So the whole vibe, I want it to be like a dialogue and not a monologue. Now, I think it's very important before we talk about leadership for you to understand my journey. I think I would self-identify as a leader. That's a very important thing because a lot of times we have a kind of fake modesty around whether we see ourselves as leaders or not. And if someone asks you, are you a leader? Well, let me ask you. So what's your name?
My name is Rushabh.
And tell me a little bit about yourself. Where are you from?
Yeah, so I'm from Bombay and I'm a financial market graduate from NM, and then I pursued a corporate career at ICICI Bank, and now I'm here to doing my master's.
So when you hear the word leader, what does it mean to you?
So MS Dhoni is someone who comes to my mind when we talk about word leader.
Yeah, why? What does Dhoni have?
So his leadership skills. So I mean, when he wins, when the team wins, I think he's back. He's at the back of the team. And when he loses, the team loses, he's at the front. So that is something, of course, there are many things, but this is one of the sharpest things that I have been known about him. So
that's a very important, actually, description that you've just given, that you should be ready to share credit if you're a leader and ready to take blame if you're a leader. So I think that's a great definition. Do you see yourself as a leader? Do you aspire to be a leader?
Absolutely, yes.
And what would you, if you had to shut your eyes and say one adjective that comes to your mind when you hear the word leader, what is it?
I think gratitude is something that I love the most. So that is something that I tend to inculcate in my journey.
Okay, let's take a similar question from one of the women here now. We've heard from one of the young men. Anyone? What does the word leader mean to you? What does the word leader mean to you? There has to be someone ready to jump up and speak, because this is something, by the way, we find in mixed classrooms, mixed workspaces a lot of times. Women wait for someone to point out to them, someone to say, hey, why don't you stand up, instead of putting themselves forward. So I was waiting to see if that would happen here, and unfortunately that is happening, right? Unfortunately, think of this as an opportunity, and there's this sense of being sort of stepping back and saying, okay, maybe if I do, I don't know, will it be odd, right? Is that what some of you are thinking? So let me just randomly call out at someone there.
Hi.
Good.
I'm Richa. So leadership for me means leading by values. Like integrity is something which is very close to my heart. And I feel that if, as a leader, I'm able to lead by those fair values, of course, my team and organization kind of, follow through that.
How will you convince people of your values? A leader has to convince their team that their values are worthy of emulation, worthy of following, right?
So it's by actions. I think if by multiple actions, in the teams, and, I'm sure there are conflicting situations, and how do you really deal those situations with, coming as forefront and standing strong on those values? It shows how fair and, the belief system that you have while you're leading an organization.
So I think you made a really important point, which I would paraphrase as show, don't tell. One of the things I believe in is, if you demonstrate your own ability to do something, instead of telling a room full of people, whether in a classroom or whether at a workspace, do this, if they see you doing it, right? Which is why the phrase show, don't tell. right? Lead by example. And I think then I think you have enough moral credibility or strength of personality to say, I did it, why can't you? So thank you for sharing that. Let's start a little bit with me talking about myself. So I bring up this image because most of you are too young to have been around in 1999. Was anyone in this room around in 1999? Anyone? How old were you? Average age in 1999? 3 years? 4 years? 1 year? Okay. So let's start at the beginning of my journey. What I understood about leadership, how it started for me. I think that would be a kind of useful segue into our larger conversation. When I was roughly your age, I wasn't that sure about what I wanted to do. So one of the myths about leaderships is that leaders always know exactly what they want to do. Leaders don't always know exactly what we want to do. I'm going to self-identify as a leader. Part of leadership is being able to take a risk, is being able to bet on yourself, is being able to gamble on yourself. That's part of leadership. So I was a bit conflicted. Did I want to be a lawyer? Did I want to be a journalist? As it so happened, I did my literature at St. Stephen's College, and then I did my first master's in film and television production. I trained how to edit movies. I was a trained technical producer. And when private news television was just starting out in India, I applied for a job to New Delhi Television, NDTV, that then used to produce 30 minutes of a news bulletin for Doordarshan. Right? So any guesses when private news TV started in India? A year? Anyone? Anyone? 1995. And it started with no channels. It started with the public broadcaster Doordarshan asking 2 production houses, India Today and New Delhi Television, to produce a 30-minute bulletin in English and a 30-minute bulletin in Hindi. Today we have close to 500 channels, but I come as a child of TV, literally first generation practitioner of broadcast journalism, from an age when there was no TV. There was no private television news when I began. So the fact that I was technically trained really helped me. And that is the other thing I want to talk about leadership. Learn as many skills as you can. Specialize in one, but learn operationally as many skills as we can. So I hope somebody's taking notes, because we've already got 3 things that we've identified to be essential to leadership, right? The first, which I think we heard from Rushabh, it's about taking responsibility when things go south and sharing credit when things go really well. The second we heard here was about showing what you're capable of. The third, I identified as a capacity for risk-taking. But I'm also putting on the table a 4th one. And the 4th one is learn as many skills as you can, right? Specialize in 1, maybe 2. But honestly, if today you told me to go behind that camera and film this, I could do it. If you told me to put a phone on a selfie position and mic myself up to that phone and shoot myself, assuming there's nobody, I could do it. If you told me to write a note on this, I could do it. If you told me to design a graphic using Canva, I could do it. If you told me to use Premiere Pro, Adobe, and edit out clips of the session, I could do it. Though my core skill is to be a storyteller and to be a reporter. But I have made a conscious decision to learn operationally and functionally all the other affiliated skills of my professional choice. Why? 1, because it makes you self-sufficient, right? Tomorrow, if you're alone and you have to start again, and many companies have had to do that along the way, you will not feel bereft and helpless. 2, when your colleagues, when your friends come to you and they have a problem, instead of just sitting in an armchair sort of way and saying, hey, I don't think that's legitimate, if they actually see that you have tried to design a graphic and then put it on render, and then they then come to you and say, you know what, the machine is really slow, it isn't rendering. Now, if I knew nothing about rendering and graphic design, I'm likely to get very angry with my designer and say, why are you taking so long to do this? But if I've actually made an effort to do it myself, I come from a place where my colleague is more ready to listen to me, and I come from a place of greater empathy and understanding in being able to judge, is my colleague making an excuse, Or is there something legitimate to what she or he is saying? A lot of my leadership lessons have been borrowed from real life. They have been borrowed from being in situations where your decisions can make the difference between somebody dying and somebody living, right? And once you have been exposed to that kind of environment, everything else feels quite easy and manageable. I often tell the man who was the officer who was army chief during Kargil, General VP Malik, I said Kargil for me, going to Kargil for me was a masterclass, not just in reporting, but it was a masterclass in life, right? And that does take me to my next bit of advice, that there is nothing there's no teacher as good as real life. There is no classroom as good as real life. There is no textbook as good as real life, right? So the more hands-on you can get with anything you're trying to do, yes, the research may exist in your phone and in your laptop, but take it out, test it on real people, test it on friends, test it on families, engage with the outside world as much as you can. We live in an age where I know people your age who sometimes tell me that you only talk to each other via text, right? And the pandemic multiplied some of those sort of dysfunctionalities of a wired generation, but trust me, there is no better learning than an actual real life scenario. So where did it begin for me? I came back from Colombia and war broke out between India and Pakistan. And one thing I knew was I have to go and cover this war. I just have to be there. I couldn't sleep at night thinking, how can you report on a war sitting in Delhi? The war is happening in the highest reaches of the Himalayas. How can I sit in Delhi and cover this war? So I kept begging my organization, I kept begging the army, and they said, no, we can't send you because you're a woman and we cannot have a woman at the war front. Now, today we are in a situation where we have women flying fighter jets, we have women landing on warships, we have women leading the Republic Day parade. But in 1999, and even today to a large degree, infantry zones, where it's eyeball to eyeball, fist to fist, right? War zones are still essentially dominated by men. And the army's logic was that, we cannot have anything distracting from the larger purpose, which is to win this war. Now, anybody know why India and Pakistan fought in Kargil? Just say from where you are.
Pakistan had captured a peak in Q.
Mm-hmm.
And India wanted to claim it back.
Well, you get the gist right, but not the location. Pakistan occupied Kashmir is right now in Pakistan control. That's why it's called Pakistan occupied Kashmir. So they've captured not one, but many peaks there. So let me tell you what happened, because it's very important to understand what we were dealing with here, to understand what I'm going to say in this conversation. What would happen was, Kargil is a small town between Srinagar and Ladakh on the national highway. This is the national highway that connects Ladakh to Srinagar and then to the rest of the country. On this highway, the critical supplies of the military and other things that connect Ladakh to the rest of the country move, okay? So imagine a highway, and then on top of the highway, there are mountains, barren, jagged mountains that get bitterly cold, like unimaginably cold in the winter months. Now, India and Pakistan had an agreement that jab sardi ka time hai, both soldiers will come back to lower heights because it is inhospitable. The terrain is treacherous. You can't have your men, out in the open at those climbs where it doesn't make sense to hold those positions. So India and Pakistan had agreed on this. Under Pervez Musharraf, who was then the army chief of Pakistan, Pakistan sent in its men after India had moved back, like every year, and thought that the Pakistanis had moved back, to come in 8 kilometers inside Indian territory. And they kabza karod all of these mountain peaks and sat on top of it. Okay? So now you think of this highway and you think of those mountain peaks and you think of Pakistani men sitting on top of it, on your land. Now, India has to get these men. What is the purpose of this war? Why do we go to war? Because we're like, you're sitting in our land. We are going to push you out. But one of the problems with war is that whoever's on a height has the advantage, right? Because the guy on the top can look down. The guy on the top is looking down. And so, our soldiers had to move up these mountains from all sides to get these intruders out. This was the Kargil War. Okay. The Kargil War is often called India's first televised war because I reported it from the front line. However, what many people don't know is we did not have live broadcasting in India at that time. Kargil was in Jammu and Kashmir, then a full state. In Jammu and Kashmir, mobile phones were blocked. Why am I telling you these things? Because it really tested my capacity for leadership to report this war. And so I'm going to join the dots to leadership after I tell you the situation I was in. So there were no mobile phones. There was no transmission available to send footage. And I finally managed to convince the army and NDTV that you have to send me. And that is a lesson for all men and women here. Do not take no for an answer. See, there's a lot of, I was interviewing Guneet Monga the other day. Anyone knows who Guneet Monga is? She just won an Oscar, right? So she was telling me about this time when in 2010 she'd got nominated for an Oscar and she didn't have money to buy a ticket. She didn't have money. So she said that I used to live in a rented apartment. I came from a sort of lower income, low middle class home. We used to pay 5,000 rupees rent. We had no money. The thought of being able to buy a ticket was out of the question. So she said, I wrote a letter to every single celebrity I knew saying, pay for my ticket, including the President of India. Finally, somebody read her letter and they actually told Air India, okay, sponsor her ticket. And that's how she went to the Oscars. The reason I'm telling you this story is, she had a line there in my interview and she said, there's a lot of power in asking. And many people don't deploy that internal power. We all have the power to ask for something. If I had not asked, not once, but 10, 100 times, please send me to Kargil, right? Nobody would have thought, oh, Barkha's a good reporter. Let's find Barkha and let's send her to Kargil. I was carving my own destiny. If you want to be a leader who wants to carve your own destiny, be unembarrassed to ask. Ask for an opportunity, ask for a raise, ask for a chance to do something all over again if you feel you haven't done it correctly the first time, and be thick-skinned about hearing the word no. Don't take the no personally. Sometimes it'll hurt like hell, but keep asking. Keep asking. Sometimes the person will get so tired of your asking, they'll give you what you want. Sometimes when no one's giving, like suppose I want an interview with somebody, I'll keep calling them. Even today, after 26 years, I will keep calling them if I really want it. If you really want something, channel the power of asking. So I asked and asked and asked and asked and asked and asked and asked till they finally said, okay, you can go. But they told me two things. They said, two things you have to manage on your own. I said, what? So there are no bathrooms. Please don't come to us and say, where are the loos? There are no bathrooms. And we can't be sitting in the middle of a war saying, oh, there's a woman here. Now we have to find a bathroom. I said, no, I understand it's a war. I'm going to go into whatever the open field behind a giant truck of a tire under a tree, whatever I have to do. I said, we can't organize food. It's a war. So don't think you're going, this is your hotel, this is your khana, right? And I said, I get it, right? So I fought and fought and fought, and I reached this situation in a war zone where, again, I remind you to visualize this. There are mountains, there are Pakistanis sitting on top, there are Indian troops at the bottom. Indian troops have Bofors guns. You're just going to see that when I bring up the first clip. All along the highway, they are pounding the mountaintops along with rocket launchers. And under that fire, our men are climbing up to try and push these Pakistanis back into their land. That is basically the war in one sentence. But there is no mechanism available to send your footage back. There's nobody who's there to tell you, here are the best practices to survive. This is how you don't end up killing yourself. This is how you can get the footage back to Delhi. So I'm thrown into a situation where I have no prior experience, which I have asked to go into, where it's been made very clear to me that now you're on your own, right? So this is where my masterclass in leadership begins. So those are pictures from the war zone. Okay, I want to just hold on to this picture. Anyone recognize the man from? Yeah. So let me tell you a little story about this, and then we'll talk about leadership. But you'll find instances of leadership everywhere in this conversation. So we don't actually have to every time underline this is leadership. But let's talk a little bit about it. When this picture was taken, when Vikram had just come down from a successful operation from one of these peaks, having got the Pakistanis out. And I was meeting him just after that. And these young men, and please remember, I was 26 and a half, and most of the people I was interviewing, most of the soldiers I was interviewing were 23, 24. So we were kind of the same age. So there was a certain degree of bonding. What is the average age of this room? 25. We were your age, give or take a year. That's the good way to think about it, okay? So none of these men had ever fought a war before. I had never reported a war before. We were all sort of green behind the ears. We were all novices to that degree. Of course, the soldiers had been trained for this moment. I had not even been trained for this moment. I covered a whole war without a bulletproof vest. Today, we knew so little. We knew so little. Television news was so young. It had just started a couple of years ago. There were no news channels. Like, we were just clueless. And Vikram had just come down from a very successful operation. And I was very interested in understanding, if you tell a young person that you're going up this mountain and you may never come back in one piece, how do you deal with fear? How does a leader deal with fear, right? Is it the absence of fear? And we'll come to that. I want your responses on that. And I asked Vikram, I said, Vikram, don't you feel scared? And he threw his head back and he laughed. And then he said, Ye dil mange more yaar. Right? And that interview, which now you would have all seen the movie Sher Shah, that interview became the stuff of legend, and I felt so proud that that was my interview, that no one else had interviewed him, no one else had met him. And it was only later, after he died in the line of duty as a hero, that 10 years later I went back to Kargil with his twin, Vishal, and we sat on top of a mountain which had now been named after Vikram, and it was called Batra Top. Right? An entire mountain peak had been named after him. And Vishal and I sat on that mountain top and we said, we can feel Vikram here. And then Vishal said, it was his first visit to Kargil, he was his twin. They used to be called Love and Kush, if you remember their home names. And he said, मैं अपने भाई को एक चिट्ठी लिखूंगा. So he sat there in this sort of barren mountain landscape and wrote a letter to his brother, and then he just set it loose into the blue sky, and he cried, and I cried. And that was the first time I cried about Kargil. Why did I not cry earlier? There were many reasons to cry. I saw a lot of coffins, a lot of body bags go home before me because I'd fought so hard to get that chance to report that story that I didn't want anyone to have the opportunity to say, see, if you send girls to the war front, they'll cry. The boys cried. We had formed a small group of 4 people, and we would go up and down this highway, right? The highway I just described, looking for stories, but also, now here were our challenges. We're in a situation where we have no prior experience. We could die. We have to find ways to live, and we have to find ways to send what we're filming back to the news headquarters. So, kaise kare? So we would walk to points where the choppers were taking off to carry the body bags of our soldiers home. And we would go and fold our hands before the chopper pilot and say, sir, hamara tape le jao. Those days, we were still filming on tape. And that is how we would get our footage back. There were sat phones that the army used that they would sometimes let you use and try and make a call. But wo other time chalte nahi the, right? And yet you can see the remarkable thing about this picture is that we're in a war zone. It's the middle of the war. And just look at the smiles on everybody's faces, right? And I think that embrace of something you do, the full embrace of something you do, to not take no for an answer, to innovate, to find solutions outside of the book, because the book will not give you all the answers in life. Whatever you have learned in a classroom, whatever you have learned in a management course, whatever you go on to learn in an MBA, whatever rule book an organization throws at you in really challenging moments of your life, the rules will not work as you were taught they will work. They will just not work. There will be a set of black swan moments like COVID was. There will be a set of unpredictable things like no phones. I mean, you're going into a war zone, there's no phone. What do? And you will often have to learn survival before you learn, survival and innovation before you learn anything else. Not all situations will be as extreme as a war zone, but there will be variations of it that you will face in your life. The pandemic threw up some questions like that for so many organizations that were confronted quite literally with closure or or carrying on. And only those organizations survived that were able to innovate very quickly and in real time. So this was how it looked when our soldiers were able to get to the top of a peak and reclaim a peak. And look at their leadership. Forget our leadership as reporters innovating in this situation. Look at their leadership. I still remember General Ved Malik saying to me, "We will fight with what we have." He said this because we were sending soldiers into sub-zero temperatures without snow boots. Ammunition was running short. The Pakistanis were on the heights. They had the advantage, right? Men were seeing their best buddies die in front of them. And yet, there was something larger that they believed in. And this is something I really, really believe very strongly in. Please find one thing that is larger than you that you believe in. You know, you spoke about leading with your values. Your values have to stand for something that is larger than you. Your values have to stand for something that impacts a larger population that go well beyond you, right? Now, this was my Kargil experience, and we can talk more about it, but it didn't start with me. This is my mother. When I reported Kargil, a lot of people thought that I was the first woman in India to cover a war, and I was called India's first woman war correspondent. That recognition actually belongs to my mother, who died when I was 13 years old. But I was old enough by then to have been molded by this story. Much like me, in 1965, she was a journalist. When she applied for a job, having graduated from Punjab University, she went to the Hindustan Times. She went to the Hindustan Times, and the Hindustan Times editor told her, "We don't hire women." So she said, "What?" They said, "No, we don't hire women. If you want a job, you can cover the flower shows in Delhi." So she said, "You know what? I'll take what you're giving me, and I'll prove my worth." That is another life lesson to remember, guys. Never say no to no opportunity is too small to say no to. Not one opportunity. I don't feel today as an entrepreneur, as a journalist with 30 years of experience now almost, I don't feel anything is too small for me to do. Even today, I will pick up the lights and set them up. I don't have to do it. My crew often gets embarrassed. They're like, "Aap kyun kar rahe ho, ma'am?" And I'm like, "Mujhe karna hai." And nothing is too small. So my mother took what was available and proved that she was worth so much more than reporting the flower shows, right? Show, don't tell. And when war broke out between India and Pakistan in 1965, she went to her editor, who by now respected her a lot, and said, "I'd like to go and cover this war." And just like her daughter was told in 1999, she was told in 1965 that we cannot send women to the war front. There was no television then, okay? There was no even in 1999, there was barely any television, but in 1965, there was only newspapers. So she said, "You know what? If you're not going to let me cover the biggest story that there is, then mujhe chutti de do aap. I don't feel good being here. There's a war happening. I can't cover it." They said, "Okay, take chutti." She had a cousin in the army. She went with a notepad and pen alone to the war front and started sending dispatches back, right? And that is a photograph of her. You can see the tanks at the back. What I never understood, and unfortunately, she died before I could ask her this question, is how did she cover a war in a sari? Because I can't even wear one today without tripping. Anyway, that's more images of her, not me, from the war front, right? So this is a pretty amazing story. And then we fast forward. So we went back into time, and now we're fast forwarding into time, into the COVID years, right? What did I do in COVID? I had the same response that I had in Kargil. I said, I cannot sit in a studio. I cannot sit in a studio. I cannot sit in a studio and cover a war, and I cannot sit in a studio and report the biggest story of my lifetime. Today, we don't want to remember the pandemic because the psychological need is to sort of feel like life is back in the way we understood it, right? But think of those 2 years when nobody was stepping out. And I don't know how many of you were around in Delhi then, but from all of our major cities, we saw scenes like this one, where daily wages were walking back home. Why were they walking back home? Because in the first lockdown, we had closed public transport. So they had no other way to go. They'd lost their source of income. And like you and me, they thought the world was ending and they wanted to be with the people they love. Now, I decided at that time that I am going to follow them. So I started walking the highways, right? I started walking the highways. It was the same impulse that the tougher a situation gets, the more I believe that it is my job as a journalist, as a leader in media, to be at the front line of it. Right? A leader will always be found at the front line of her professional space. A leader will be leading by example, will not be following once somebody else does it. So I took the initiative to get out there, and it was damn difficult. We were 4 people in a Maruti Ertiga, the same one that I've come in to the institute today. And initially, everything was shut. Like, you couldn't get a meal at a dhaba, you couldn't get a cup of chai. And there was this mistaken notion at that time, abhi bhi chal raha hai because of these, you know, people haven't lost barcodes in restaurants. And of course, they're climate friendly because they use less paper. But how did they start? Because there was this mistaken idea that the virus is caught by touching surface, which we now know to be false. It travels by air. But at that time, you had to wear gloves. You had to wear full PPEs before entering anything. And there was no place to sleep. So what we would do is we would drive, then we would drive back. So we were effectively living in the car. Then I said, this is not possible. It's not possible to do this. So let's just follow these people and see where it takes us. I ended up on a road journey that took me from Delhi to Kerala by road. I spent in the first wave itself 125 days on the road continuously. I ran out of clothes, I ran out of food, but by then I had so established myself as the frontline face of this story that I will tell you that people who I did not know were messaging me on social media, sending food, offering to wash my clothes, because they would also say, I had those 2 kurtas, nothing was open, right? My shoes broke, somebody sent me a box of shoes. But it was an extraordinary learning experience once again in survival. You will be thrown into situations in your life where that was me outside a locked factory. This truck was carrying workers who were trying to, on the sly, get out of the city. And they were packed together, and the police wasn't letting me sort of see what was inside. So I climbed onto the truck to see it. I'm just showing you these images because in some ways I've always believed that the core of my leadership is to never take no for an answer, to always show my passion and my commitment so that that cannot be questioned, and to set the agenda. Do you set the terms or do you follow the terms? Are you going to be one of those who sets the terms or follows the terms? Nobody in the media was coming out except for a handful of local reporters and some photographers. And for the first 60 days, nobody in the television networks, except maybe 1 or 2 people, came out, even as there were little children like this on the road, you know, really sort of images of despair. This was an old lady I met. This is a very important quality of leadership that I think is captured in this image. Anyone knows what the word you use? Let me tell you the story and then you tell me the word. This lady, whose name was Leelavati, and she had been thrown out of her house during COVID by her own family. They said, we don't have the money to keep you, please go. So I met her at the railway station in Mumbai, in Bandra. And she was sitting there alone, and she told me that, can you put me, okay, by now the trains had started running for migrant workers. So she said, can you put me on a train? I said, where do you want to go? She said, I don't know, I don't have anywhere to go. Her husband had died, none of her children wanted her. And I said, I'll put you on a train. Do you have any money? She had no money. And she started weeping. And even though there was this whole thing of social distancing, for me anyway it had collapsed because I was in the people, among the people, in the ICUs, in the slums of Dharavi. I was everywhere. And when she broke down, she held on to me and she started crying and I had to hold her. And that empathy, that was the word I was going to say, that empathy was a cornerstone of my leadership approach. This story was one of our most watched stories on Mojo Story, and we got offers to help this lady from across the world. She was finally taken in by a local politician who said that she has nowhere to go, I'll keep her in my house, right? So you can do good even among despair. you can do a lot of good. That's me on a, that's me in the second wave. My father had died by then from COVID. And I didn't know how to process my grief. So I said, what do I do? And then I said, you know what, the only way to honor him would be to keep working. And at that time, there was this big question mark over how many people have actually died from COVID. But a lot of the places where bodies were being abandoned were unreachable. So near Kanpur somewhere, I think this was, and I asked some guy on a motorcycle, भैया वहाँ कैसे पहुँचते हैं? He said, वहाँ तो सड़क नहीं है. तो I said, आपका motorcycle जाएगा? हाँ जाएगा. So I went on the motorcycle and I went. Why am I showing you these images? Before we come to the next part of our conversation, why am I talking about these images? I'm talking about these images to share with you not just my life journey so that you get to know me a little bit better and you look at the challenges that I have confronted at every stage from Kargil to COVID, but also so that you get some sense of the principles I've held on to never take no for an answer, the passion that I feel about my work, the fact that in many situations you will be asked to think on your toes and you won't have time to plan out something. You can do all of the, what are they called, business plans that you want. But life will throw you a curveball and you've got to think in real time. What are you going to do? What are you going to do if you're running a company and suddenly you're told no workers can come physically to work anymore? Right? I'm dealing with bombs and death, but there will be variations of those kind of existential challenges. And through all of it, can you keep your empathy alive? Can you keep your empathy alive in the toughest times, right? So I wanted you to have a sense of the kind of things I've done, and I want to now open this up, and you thought of applying it, let's say, to your own life. So let's apply it. Let's model this and apply it to your own life. Something you've really wanted to do, and somebody has said no. How hard have you pushed back against the no? Now I want real life examples. Doesn't have to be war, doesn't have to be COVID. It can be your life where the way I felt about reporting that war and reporting COVID, you felt you really wanted to do something. You really, really wanted to do something and somebody somewhere told you, no, you can't do it. Anyone? Yeah?
Veda.
Hi.
I work at Masters Union. I'm not one of the students here. I'm in the marketing team. It's a really small story. 2014, I was working with Youth Ki Awaaz and I was writing a lot of activistic pieces and I was in Chennai at the time. A friend of mine reached out from Vasant Vihar and said, मेरे मेड की बेटी की शादी हो रही है 14 साल की बच्ची है 44-year-old मैन से शादी हो रही है हमें पता चला परसों और 3 दिन में हो रही है शादी हम सब कर चुके हैं कुछ नहीं हो रहा तुम बताओ अब यूथ की आवाज़ में काम करते हो व्हाट कैन वी डू अब कुछ नहीं हो रहा में 3 things had come. One was that they spoke to the police, local police, वसंत विहार थाने, who said that यार देखो situation ऐसी है कि आप अब कुछ भी करने की कोशिश करोगे we'll have to arrest somebody which is the father-in-law or somebody who's in the family, we'll have to arrest the father. Then the girl and her mother will get ostracized. When they get ostracized, then you know what happens, right? They'll have to like revert to only doing prostitution and all. इससे अच्छा wait कर लेते हैं शादी हो जाएगी फिर देखते हैं वो पहला था दूसरा these guys offered money and said कि आप ले लो to the mother who is their maid कि 18,000 रुपये लो till the time she turns 18 4 साल बचे हैं कर लेना बाद में शादी नहीं मानी because she's like डाउरी नहीं ले रहे सीधा और अच्छा लड़का है we know how that works right that being said he called me saying तुम ढूंढोगे solution मैं चेन्नई में बैठी हूँ I'm doing my masters in my final semester I'm like what do I do dude I'm just writing but this is a chance somebody's actually coming and telling you all the activistic stuff you're writing about do something about it but the do something about it didn't work because for a very very long time for 3 days, I called NGOs. Anshul Tiwari, who's the founder of Youth Ki Awaaz, he was the one who was personally calling. And finally, Center for Social Research agreed. And Center for Social Research also agreed. They even tried to send a caseworker there. You won't believe it. The girl herself was saying, no, I want to get married. In no situation, hum end tak pahunch hi gaye. But at the end of the day, it was her conditioning that stopped us from doing anything. But the no-nos situation, the only way for us to do it was to keep trying. और कोई तरीका नहीं था. We didn't know what else to do.
But did you try your best?
Yeah, 150 something.
Did you try
phone calls.
as many times as you could? So that's the best you can ever do,
That was the
right?
only thing.
I had a similar experience when during COVID, I went to a village in Rajasthan where child marriage, the practice of child marriage had resumed because families said, एक तो सस्ते में शादी हो जाएगी अभी सब लॉकडाउन है गेस्ट भी कम आएंगे दूसरा ये लड़कियां ना स्कूल नहीं जा रही Now, what had happened was as classrooms went digital, if you were poor, you either got locked out of the digital classroom, and if there was one device at home, the boys got to use the classroom, and the girls were told, tum baitho. So they started pushing these girls into a child marriage. And the girls were very gutsy, and with the help of a local NGO, they said, we constantly ask कि आप school नहीं जा रहे तो आप क्या कर रहे हो? तो हम एक football team शुरू करते हैं. So they started a football team. And I had reached the village when I started covering that, and I got very attached to them, and I really wanted to, one of them wanted to be a police officer, the other wanted to be an IAS officer. They were 15 and 17, the two sisters who were being married off, and the other girls were like 9, 10, जिनकी शादियां हो रही थी. And I tried so hard, but a year later they were married. I tried so hard, right? There were so many workers like that. I would get questions like, आपने वो workers चल रहे थे, आपने उनको अपनी गाड़ी में क्यों नहीं बिठाया? So I said, do you have any estimate of how many million workers were impacted? 100 million migrant workers were impacted during the pandemic. Secondly, मैं एक जने को बिठा भी लेती मेरी गाड़ी में जिसमें 4 लोग ऑलरेडी बैठे थे और उसमें पीछे वो ठीक है पानी के पीपी के साथ एक जने को मैं बिठा सकती थी. But my job is to tell the story in a way that leads to institutional change. That change, sometimes my work will work, sometimes I'll hit a wall. So what I want to say to you is, as long as you tried your best, there's nothing more you can do. You will win sometimes, you will fail sometimes. But there are a lot of people who don't try their best because they're intimidated by the first no. I have so many young women in particular, but boys also, who walk up to me and they say, we really wanted to do this, but so-and-so said no. So फिर हमने फिर कुछ और ही कर लिया, right? Now, let's hear more examples. Let's hear more examples where, at the back there.
Am I audible?
You are.
So when I was in my second year of college, I was also from UIP college, and I remember we had a play on vigilantism, which had certain things that were a little not acceptable by whoever was in the Dusu circuit at that point. And we were performing at a place, and they stopped our play in the middle and told us to not perform till the time we changed the script. And it's a girls' college, and we were asked to move out. And we were threatened with things like, you're 30 girls, you will not even realize where you will go if we attack you.
Right.
And we had 18-year-olds working under us, and we were just in our second year of college, and our third years were also scared. Everybody was scared. So we went back to our college, cried for a little bit because we were so scared. Yeah. And a year early, before that, the whole Ramjas situation had happened. So we were genuinely very scared. We went back, we sat down, we decided, if we don't do this, there's no point of doing this play. So we went to the police station. We asked if we could do public performances right outside the venue where we were called to perform. And they said, they laughed at us for a little bit, and they were like, ठीक है मतलब कर लो, हम नहीं आएंगे आपको बचाने. We were like, but आप permission दे दो, बाकी हम देख लेंगे. So then we went out. We called our fellow people in other colleges and asked them, guys, we're doing this. They threw us out from the venue. We're doing it right outside the venue. We don't have police protection. Normally, you get police protection when you're doing public performances. And most of the colleges showed up. We were very scared. People were there, and we performed, and we did not even stay to talk to the audience. We ran. But just the experience of giving it back to them, performing right where we were thrown out because of something we wanted to say. It was great. We were scared out of our wits, but we were really happy that we did that.
No, that's a great story, right? And I think what I'm trying to say is I'm not encouraging mass mutiny here, lest the faculty sort of be a little worried कि ये किसको बुला लिया हमने ये talk देने के लिए. What I'm actually trying to say is that life is a set of negotiations, right? You will not always get what you want, but what you have to feel is that you tried your best to push through something that you genuinely believed in. You may even find 10 years later that you think that your way of handling that was wrong, and that tomorrow, if you were the person in charge of Dusu, maybe you would have the same response, right? So life is a constant process of evolution and negotiation. All leaders have to negotiate. No leadership doesn't mean a sure shot guarantee of success, of getting what you look for, but to have the self-confidence and the self-belief that I gave it my best shot. Right? I think the regrets that people carry come from not giving something your best shot. So let's talk a little bit about regret. Anyone here really regrets something? You're young. So, but at 25, I'll tell you my regret. My regret is that I never got a law degree. right? I really feel passionately interested in law. A lot of the journalism I do is connected to what's happening in the courts. Is case mein kya hua? What is Keshwanand Bharati? What is this case, that case? And the truth is that I went in a different direction in life, but in the back of my mind, I had always said, you know, one day I'll be a lawyer also, right? And then in my 40s, I decided that, chalo, I'll now sit for this exam. So I went and got the exam papers, and I promise you, like I'm going to fail this exam. Because it was, instead of law, it was about like random GK, like in 1995, which country won the table tennis gold for whatever, right? And I was like, there's no way. And I said, imagine how embarrassing it will be if I fail this exam. Like, what will I say to the outside world? So I didn't take it. It remains an abiding regret of my life, right? I don't know what I would have done with it. Would I have left journalism, become a lawyer? Would I have, you know, maybe I would have found that it didn't interest me once I'd done it. But it remains, it probably is my only regret. Like for everything else in my life, I have fully pushed, covering a war, covering a pandemic, almost dying in both cases more than once in life-death situations. But law, and you know, sometimes our fears are irrational and small. You know, I have doctors who tell me, I'm notoriously scared of needles. So I have doctors who tell me, you're not scared of bombs, but you're scared of a blood test, right? But this is how human beings are wired. We have strange things that hold us back. Strange things. And sometimes we'll do things we don't even know that we have the strength to do. So let's, before we talk about fear, because fear is an essential obstacle to leadership, and I want to go back to, you know, what I learned from Vikram Batra and other heroes like him, what I learned during COVID. Let's talk about regret. Anyone here carrying regret? Something you really wanted to do and you didn't do? Are you all living fully the lives you want to live? Yes, no, maybe? Who's saying, okay, I heard it, yeah, there.
I wouldn't say that my story is gonna be like a more of a social act or probably, you know, it's
So
like a
hold it there. Never apologize for your story. Your story is important to you. Don't devalue yourself by qualifying your story. What's important to you is important. Now carry on.
So I think my biggest regret is that I did not stand up for myself, what I wanted to do in my career in terms of, because at the stage, you know, in the early times, there are parents who are just for, you know, engineering lines, and, you know, they were not open for a mass communication line or probably a fashion kind of an oriented line.
Yeah.
So I think my regret is that I took a lot of time in convincing my part of family to, you know, make me go ahead for a thing that I wanted to do always. Like I actually wasted my 2 years in engineering because, you know, for the fact that I'm also a twins. So, you know, the parents have that kind of a thing that the twins should do whatever they are doing together, right? So I think 2 years of time was very, very important time for me to, you know, actually use it in the right way and make the decision and go ahead.
So what are you doing now?
So right now I'm doing parallelly different what I wanted to do.
But are you doing what you want to do?
Sort of like in life, you come across a lot of situations where you understand that, you know, probably this was a better thing that I'm doing currently. So right now what I'm doing, I'm happy about that. But yes, in a way, that was a kind of a thing that I wanted to do always. And I took a lot of time to.
So one of the things I want to say is that it's never actually too late to do what you want to do. I don't know, again, borrowing from the Oscars, you know, Michelle Yeoh got up and she said in her speech, she said, don't let anyone tell you that you're past. Don't let anyone tell a woman. It's more said to women than to men, but it can be said to men also, you're past your prime, right? So secondly, everything that you learn, you'll apply somewhere. So maybe today you feel that, oh, that engineering, you know, I didn't really value it. I have a good friend. Any of you heard of the band Indian Ocean or Aisi Taisi Democracy? So Rahul Ram's a very good friend of mine. Any guesses what Rahul Ram studied? Do you know he's Dr. Rahul Ram? He studied chemical engineering from Cornell and then became a musician, right? Why do I mention it? I mention it because everything that you learn, right, you will find some use for it somewhere. You may not consciously realize that. You know, you may not consciously realize that engineering, you know, makes you look at structure and assembly of shape and form differently when you do design. Or that today in an artificial intelligence driven world, maybe you understand things that other people are struggling to understand, where AI is now driving creativity. So one, no learning is ever wasteful. No learning is wasteful. If you learned something, you will find a way to use it. Sometimes you'll be using it in an obvious way. Sometimes you'll be using it in a subconscious way. Two, it's never too late. It's never too late, right? I'm not saying everyone's had some argument with their parents and some arguments. When I was in school, our schools used to discourage the arts. So every smart person was meant to go and be a science student. And I was terrible at science, but I was a very good student otherwise. And when I finished my class 10th and I wanted to be a humanities student, the school principal called me and said, please, you be a science student. I said, I'll be miserable. But I was lucky enough. There were many people who did streams they didn't want to, and they discovered that later in life. I'm just saying it's never too late. And if you're on the path to kind of doing what you want to do, that's kind of good enough, and don't feel कि मेरे 2 साल ज़ाया हो गए. ज़ाया कुछ नहीं होता. कुछ ज़ाया नहीं होता. Every day that you live is a learning. Every day that you learn a skill, that you learn how to conduct a conversation, that you learn how to code, you understand some concept of quantum physics, all of it. And that old idea that science exists in one box and literature exists in another, it's all gone. Today you have art that is digitally generated. You have, poetry that is understood through the prism of physics, of structure. So we live in a very exciting time where things are changing. And technology can be a great enabler. So that old way of thinking कि वो मेरा वक्त ज़ाया हो गया, कोई वक्त ज़ाया नहीं होता. But of course, you will constantly be looking to hear your inner voice and move as much as you can in that direction. I want one more story if anyone has a regret, and then I want to talk about fear. Yes, here.
So it might trigger some people. I lost my boyfriend in 2021 to suicide. So it was times of peak lockdown, and I was called to the police station because first one to be pointed is the girlfriend. So they almost harassed me in such a situation. They were not wearing masks. So they asked me, they were trying to blame me. That's what they tried to do. So I had that regret of letting that affect me till now. And I had my cat that year. It all got messed up. And then after that, so many things I couldn't do. I couldn't live fully. I let it affect me so much, and I should have come out of it really quickly.
No, there's certain things that take time.
Yeah.
It could even take all of your life to come out of it, right? It's not an easy thing. How old are you?
I'm 21 right now.
And how old were you when this happened?
19.
And what do you feel about it today? Firstly, thank you for sharing it, because it's not easy to stand up and share a story like that. And you're brave to do it. And so you have to recognize that in the capacity to stand up here and share this in a room full of people who may or may not know you is an act of leadership itself. Right? Now tell me, when you say that you weren't living a full life, do you feel you're living that life today?
I'm trying to, getting better at it, but not maybe what I thought.
So the first thing is to recognize that certain things stay with you for life, right? And that actually takes us to fear and trauma. Because I've been asked all of my life, are you fearless? Do you not feel trauma? And I feel so much trauma. I carry so much trauma inside me because one, I lost my mother when I was 13. Then I became a war reporter. I spent my entire life in zones where all I saw was death and violence, right? So that impacted me. Then COVID happened. Then I lost my father. And then I saw again so much. It's like I have been exposed to tragedy, violence, death my whole life. And I always say that courage and strength is not the absence of fear and trauma, but it is finding something in yourself or in the external world, it can be internal or it can be external, that displaces at least temporarily, right? For that moment, your fear and your trauma. When I was in Kargil, and I was also in my 20s, there was a bomb that fell from the Pakistani side at a spot, like if I'm standing here, it fell here. And there was a soldier who came running to me and said, ma'am, are you crazy? You need to move out of there. I had no idea that I was standing next to a pile of ammunition. So basically, if the bomb had fallen on that, it would have blown up, I would have died. In that moment, I lost my cameraman. I said, I can't move from here, I've lost my cameraman. He said, I will find him for you. He pushed me into an underground bunker. I spent that night in that underground bunker. He found my cameraman for me. He saved our lives. When morning came, it was the men who had saved us, they got an order to go up the mountain, and we were so grateful, but we didn't know that if they would ever come back and if we would ever see them alive again. And the 3 boys with me started crying. 3 boys means my colleagues, not the soldiers, the colleagues. Because there was this sense that these are the men who saved our lives and now they may not live. And I was very conscious of being female and I had to fight for that story. So I was, just sniffling into my shirt sleeve. And when the war got over, I would have nightmares every night about that particular soldier who saved my life. He's lived, thankfully. But I would have constant nightmares that he was dead. Right? Now, why am I sharing this story? I'm sharing this story because the outside world sees that person who is standing there with bombs going off and reporting and saying, wow, you must have no fear. And I'm here to tell you that there is not a single human being who does not have fear, who does not carry some trauma. But the brave among us, the leaders among us, are able to channel that into something else that feels larger than yourself. That's why I said in the beginning, it's important to find something larger that you believe in, right? So Vikram Batra believed that there was a larger duty he had. I believe that there was a larger story I had to tell, whether in Kargil or COVID. But I share this with you. I mean, I think I must have cried for weeks from that nightmare when I came back home. And after COVID, I found that for months I couldn't sleep, and I felt very guilty because my father had died while I was out reporting. And I felt that I was, I should have been by his side. Why was I out there in Maharashtra? I was somewhere on the road between Maharashtra and Gujarat when he got COVID. And I had been inside every hospital except the hospital where my father was, because as a reporter, they would let me in, but as a daughter, they couldn't let me in. So what I'm trying to tell you is that in acknowledging your vulnerability, standing up here and externalizing it, you've already shown that you have the capacity to live a life someday that feels 100% full. But it could also be that there is no day that your life feels that you're living at maximum capacity, because that is the nature of trauma. As long as you're able to contain it and function in the way that you want to, it's okay. Don't be hard on yourself. Yeah? And thank you again for sharing that.
Thank you.
So can we talk a little bit about fear? What frightens all of you? What holds you back? Since we've gone from vulnerability and trauma into fear. Anyone? What scares you? It can be a small thing you think is small but feels very big to you. Am I saying? Where are you? Where are you? Crippling fear of? Very important point. Other people's expectations are the most crippling thing. They are the most crippling thing. You will be shocked by how badly people are paralyzed because they think that they're never going to meet the standard that has been set by either somebody in their lives. It could be parents, it could be a partner, it could be children, or it could be complete strangers. You're constantly trying to prove yourself to somebody else. This will stand between you and being a leader. This will definitely, I know I'm making these things sound easy. I first want to tell you that none of these things are easy. It's not that I get up every day and I never have a moment of self-doubt. It's not that I get up every day and I never have a bad day and I never feel angry or I never feel scared. I already shared that many nights I can't sleep. There are many days I'll cry about something enormous that I've seen. But the one thing I don't have is any interest in what other people think of me. I have zero interest in it. And it is the most liberating thing. We live in an age of social media where every second person, bot or real, will tell you what they think about you. They will make up stories, they will provoke you. And when I was younger and when social media was still new, and I remember I was one of the first people on Twitter, I would think these people really want to have an argument, like an intelligent argument. So I would write, no, this is wrong, you are right, you are wrong about this on this day. And then I realized this is a mind game. This is a mind game. People want to get under your skin. They feel a certain power sitting at a computer trying to tell you what they think of you. Arey bhai, let me tell you, if you constantly want to meet somebody else's opinion of you, you're never going to be good enough for them, whoever the them is. Self-love is a highly underrated thing. In understanding how to lead an organization, how to lead a team, how to lead the country, how to lead an army unit. You know, I curate this festival called We the Women. And I met some really interesting women on stage. Oops, did I miss this? But I want to talk about these two. These are two army women that I met. One of them is the mother to an 8-year-old. And she spent a long time, she's a special forces officer, and she said, all my life I had only one dream, I wanted to wear a red beret, which is the beret of the paras, right? Special forces. So it's like the cutting edge of the military. And she said to me, I've never, army mein koi ye male female nahi hota. And she was telling me this really interesting story about how when she joined the military, everyone in her unit was a man. So the Jawans would call all the men Sahib. And she said they didn't know what to call me. So they were saying ma'am, something. And then she said, no, you call me Sahib because Sahib is for my rank, it's not for my gender. And she said, there's no, a soldier is gender neutral. And she told me this story. And as I started talking to her, she then revealed that she has an 8-year-old daughter. She's also married to a soldier. And the daughter is being brought up by her parents and his parents because they move around, right? And she said that, you know, the only time I pause to think is when I think, you know, about my child. But I know that I'm doing something that is larger. This dovetails into a lot of things that we've been talking about. I'm doing something that is larger than myself. I'm not doing it, yes, it's my passion, but it has a larger purpose. And for anybody who tries to guilt me, and you know how people would try and guilt her, right? You're a mother, you've abandoned your child. They won't say, wow, you're a soldier, you're a para-commando. They'll say, you're a mother, She tries to be the best parent that she can be to her child in the circumstances that she has committed herself to. Other people's expectations are meaningless. She is living the best version of herself. But I'm glad we've put this on the table because before we break so that you all can get a bite, what's the time? Okay. One more comment about other people's expectations. One more, anyone wants to talk a little bit about it? Do I see a hand there? No. Yeah.
Just want to understand, like you said about not to expect like what other people think
Not
of
to
you,
care about
not
it.
to care about what other people think of you. However, when you are a leader, you definitely want to understand how others perceive you. So how do you bridge that gap and how do you balance that?
It's a very good question because feedback is not other people's opinion, right? So for example, somebody could tell me, you know, Barkha, you have a very short fuse with when something goes wrong, which is the truth. I couldn't find my way today. I was getting very upset with my driver because every time he drives me to Gurgaon, we lose our rasta. And I was like, कि क्या है? हर बारी हम गुड़गांव आते हैं, तुम्हें गुड़गांव से ही कुछ. And I was getting very, because I didn't want to be late. So I am that sort of person. I recognize it in myself that I get very agitated if something's not going according to a plan. I start getting very agitated. So I need to give my team, the people who work with me, the enabling environment to tell me that, you know, if you say that, if we're already lost, we're going to take another wrong turn because you are getting so agitated. That is not what I mean by when I say don't care about other people's opinion. I don't mean to say that I am perfect, you are perfect, there are no flaws in us, there's no capacity to get better. We are all works in progress, right? What I mean is something else. I mean somebody saying, you know, you haven't been this kind of sister. You haven't been this kind of partner. You're too ambitious. Why are you always thinking of your career? Or, you know, I mean essential things that I feel that go to the core of my living, that are essential to the choices I've made, right? People have judgments of them. There are people who will say more to women than to men, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? Why haven't you settled down yet? Why haven't you had children yet? If you've had children, why aren't you, you know, more and more, and we'll talk about this in the next section where we're specifically going to look at some of the disparities between men and women in leadership positions. But more and more women face an absence of equality in their personal spaces, right? And that personal space then spills over into professional spaces. So we have to distinguish between taking feedback about yourself and not being hierarchical about receiving that feedback. But sometimes that feedback will contradict something you really believe in. So I'll give you real life examples. At Mojo, I have had young people say, let's think of something real, like, we don't want to work on any weekend. Suppose they say that. I will say that you came into news. News doesn't pause on the weekend. So the best thing I can do for you is to have a rotating weekend so that everybody works one Sunday. And nobody has to do all Sundays. Nobody's expecting that. Everybody needs some time off. But if you came into journalism thinking that you're going to have a very well-ordered life, it will start at this time and it will end at this time, so this career is not for you. This profession is not for you. Maybe you have every right to live the life you want to. But if you believe that you want a very controlled environment, this profession is not for you. Now, I have taken the feedback. I have not agreed with it. I have put my principle there on the table. That person can turn around and say, you're this, I don't know, what is it called? Boomer. You're this boomer. You're giving us saying, you people had no work-life balance. You can have your view. I can have my view. But eventually, if I feel very strongly about something, I'm going to stick to it. And I'm going to stick to it even if I'm disliked for it. And I think we underestimate the strength you must have to sometimes not be liked. Leadership is not about being popular all the times with all of the people. You cannot be a leader. You cannot. I'm going to be controversial and give you something to think about as you go to lunch. Popularity and leadership is not the same. You are not a leader if you don't upset a few people sometimes. You've got to stir up things, right? So what is that difference between being respected and being liked? Sometimes the two come together and it's wonderful. Sometimes people will hate you for your guts, but they will still respect you for what your capacity is, right? So let's pause here and come to the sort of second part of the conversation where I want to look specifically at data, look at the disparities in female-male leadership, and also talk about, I picked 6 words that I think are essential traits of leadership. I want you to add to that. Maybe at the end of the class, a small exercise we can do is we can pick 25 words that we believe define an effective leader. So I guess we can pause now because you must be all starving. Thank you. Thank you very much. So we're going to perk this up by actually getting more of you to talk. And what I want to do is just look at some data points that actually show us the disparity between men and women. Okay. So just look at this slide. Tell me broadly what you understand of it. When we use the phrase female labor force participation compared to male labor force participation, what does it very simply mean? It just means the number of women in the workforce as a percentage of population compared to the number of men as a percentage of population. And as you can see from this figure, these are the latest data available from the government's own statistics. We are seeing that more than twice, men are more than twice of women in the workforce. And let me tell you something else that's shocking. While at one level, we keep looking at all of these women making great strides, right? Like we were talking about women who are fighter jet pilots, women who are at the front line of science, of tech. It seems like there's nothing women can't do. But actually, the number of women working is not going up, it's going down. And in the pandemic, we saw a number of women drop out of the workforce. So we want to talk a little bit about, particularly about why that's happening. Okay, this was an astonishing figure to me. Only 100 of 2,000 listed firms have women as the MD and CEOs. Right? Does that number surprise you or is it as expected? Would you have thought that number to be higher? Anybody? Are you surprised or is it as you thought it would be? As expected, you think? You thought the number was so low? So I'm going to ask you why you think the number is as low as it is. Now, I picked up one area, pandemic. This is a global figure, but it's also largely true for India. 7 out of 10 healthcare workers are women. Nurses, ASHA workers, and so on. 7 out of 10. And how many women hold leadership positions in healthcare? 25%. Right? So this is the kind of disparity that we're still talking about. Now, a lot of this goes back to the fact that women are expected to effectively hold 2 jobs, one at home and one at the workspace. And there are a number of women who, because they can't handle the pressure that society expects them to handle, managing both home and work, that they end up at home and not at work. But if you were to put money on the work that women do at home, or more women do than men, though I think that should change, unpaid domestic work of women amounts to 7.5% of India's GDP. If you started paying women for all the work that they do at home, this is how it would reflect as a percentage of GDP. So let's talk a little bit about why we think this gap exists. We'll keep the last part of our conversation today for the traits of leadership. I want to talk about this gap in leadership between men and women. Let's go over the figures once more. Female labor force participation, 25%. It had slumped even lower in the pandemic years. Only 100 of 200 listed firms have women as MDs and CEOs. Where 7 out of 10 healthcare workers are women, only 25% leadership roles are held by women, and unpaid domestic work of women amounts to 7.5% of the GDP. Now, you said you were not surprised by this. It's as expected. Did you not think that given that women achievers are in the headlines all the time, things have actually changed? Or do you actually think very little has changed?
I do think things have changed. That it'll be super ignorant to say things haven't changed. Yes, but I think the intensity of change hasn't been that much. Also, the headlines that you're talking about, those are larger things that sell, things that will get highlighted. But at a ground level, at a grassroots level, things haven't changed a lot.
Let me share another interesting thing. It's called, sociologists call it Sanskritization. As you move up the socio-economic ladder, you would imagine more women would work. But actually poorer women, because they need to work. It's middle class women and upper middle class women who work less than poorer women. Yeah. Right? So this idea that education will automatically translate into more women working, this is not happening. What do you think holds women back?
So there are a couple of things that can lead to someone deciding not to work. There is, I have grown up in a house where my mother never worked. So I have not seen the possibility of me ever working.
The absence of role models.
The absence of role models is there. Then the other thing is, it's not taken seriously. Like, your work is a hobby rather than a career. Yeah. Which is a very, very prevalent thing. And I've heard this from my family members, some people who are educated, like you said.
Yeah.
Another reason can probably be, even if I am very ambitious, I want to make a career, I've fought with everyone and I've got my education, gotten a job. Sometimes the expectations out of me at work and at home will never match. They will not match. And so I would rather succumb to the expectations than to fight them, because there's only so much you can fight.
I think you've captured it, that all of the conversations about equality at the workspace have been about equality at the workspace. And we haven't had the conversation about equality at home. And if we don't have the conversation about equality at home, then we can't have equality at the workspace. But just looking at this issue through the lens of men for a moment. If you and I are conditioned by a certain sort of set of inputs, then so are the guys, right? Now, the pressure on men, for example, in a patriarchal culture, to be the providers, to be the people who will primarily be the economic mainstay. You made a very perceptive point about women's work is considered a hobby or vocation and not the main career. But I'm sure, and I'd like to hear from one of the men here, I'm sure there is a pressure on men. For example, if a guy decided that, you know what, let's say a guy's married and has children, and the guy gets up and says, I don't want to do this job, I want to do this, all my life I wanted to be a guitarist. So you know what, I'm going to start a band, right? chances are, although it's changing, that he will be asked, but can you look after, will that pay the bills, right? So that pressure to pay the bills is also a sexist pressure on men. It's not that men are free from the pressure that chain women. So we have to also start talking about how men are also chained by certain kinds of pressures. Is there any guy who wants to talk about this? Is there a guy here who wants to? I've heard from a young woman. I want to hear from a young man. Do you feel the pressure when you make a career choice, somewhere subconsciously, that you've got to have enough money that you're bringing in, whether or not you're married?
Hello, ma'am.
Hi.
So I'll share from my father's experience. And he had a very large dream of representing India in the Indian cricket space. And he played till Ranji Trophy till Gavaskar and Kapil Dev. But unfortunately, my grandfather, he had a very bad medical condition and he had to been called back to family. That my grandfather can't take off the business that we had, and now you are the heir, and then you have to come back and leave your cricket dream, and you are supposed to like take care of the family, take care of the business, and that's where he says that regret part that you were talking about, and I was connecting with the dot.
Yeah.
That he said, I wish I could have taken that career ahead.
Yeah.
Because, but unfortunately, that was not the case in reality.
Yeah.
So it is very much relevant in the men's case as well.
Yes, and I think that we need to acknowledge that the pressures that keep women out of the workforce are also the pressures that keep men in a workforce that they may not want to be in, right? So it kind of works both ways. No one gives men the option of not working. Women are given the option to not work. But the unfair thing is when women are doing two jobs, the job at home and the job at work. And what basically happened in the pandemic is you had millions of women actually just leaving the workforce because between children not going to school, men working from home, and them also trying to keep their job, it was an impossible sort of situation. Is there anyone else who wants to add to this thought about a new, at the back? A new relationship with work that is developing, and organizations around the world are having to contend with this question.
Hi, I'm Lakshata. I sort of have an unpopular opinion over this. My perspective is that the value of face value and the personal brand is something that we see today. And what I have observed in some of the big brands, they have women as their front runners, as their faces, but those women might or might not be working that hard or might not be in the management sometimes, but they are referred to as the face value because they know that women empowerment is an issue that will resonate with people.
So they do it to tick the box.
Yeah, to tick the box, and now that hypocrisy has sort of created a stigma around it, and the women who actually work, considering the example of Malala Yousafzai, so some people who actually work that hard, but there are also, women who don't work and are considered as the face value of the brand that men work for. So that is also wrong for the men, and that goes vice versa as well. So that is one opinion that I'd like to share.
So let's reframe your argument just a little bit. I think I see the point you make about tokenism. We don't want tokenism. You don't want an environment where somehow a woman is the prominent face of a company where the heavy lifting of the work is being done by somebody else. In this case, you suggest men. So I guess that takes us to the next question, that to plug the leadership gap, should places be gender neutral or gender friendly? Anyone? What are we looking for? Are we looking, for example, for the idea called family leave, which is personally what I remember once interviewing Melinda Gates, and Melinda Gates said to me that at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which they still run together after their divorce, they don't have maternity leave, they have family leave. And the idea behind this is that you basically use the workspace to actually have a larger conversation about the stereotypes that trap both men and women. So there might be a new father who wants to spend as much time with his child as a new mother. Equally, there might be a new mother who does not need as much time as people assume she must have with her child. So if you have a gender neutral family policy, I think that's progressive. But there are other people, other companies who would argue that you need a greater flexibility for the female employee than for the male employee. I personally don't agree with that. I personally think that workspaces should be empathetic to both men and women. If you have a creche for the children of your employees, it should be available for both men and women. If you have leave when somebody has a child, it should be available for both men and women. This is what I believe. But I know that this is an ongoing debate. So let's throw it out into the open. Is there a way that these numbers will look better Suppose you were running a company and you wanted these numbers to look better. Suppose you were running a company where you wanted fewer women to leave, right? But you still needed to be fair to the men working there. What would you do? Anyone? That's why I asked the question, gender neutral or gender friendly? And you can have both sort of views. Like, what is the one thing you think you identified it as not being able to cope with those multiple pressures? Should that be a company's problem? Is it a company's problem that somebody is not getting along with their in-laws? Or they need to drop their children to school? I'm just throwing that. Your answer might be yes, it is a company's problem. Because one of the things I will say is your generation believes a lot in this phrase called work-life balance. I have a slightly complex view on this. I believe that we can never, maybe there are professions where it's possible, but in most professions, you can never fully leave your work behind. And the reverse is also true. You cannot come into your work fully leaving the rest of your life behind. So this imagined separation that we think that work is work and the rest of life is life, in my lived experience, this doesn't exist. You will be out at your child's birthday party and get a phone call from work. Equally, you will be in the boardroom and get a call from your child's teacher. Both things are legitimate, both things happen, both things are normal, and there's been too much theory-bazi, in my opinion, around this work-life separation. It doesn't exist. So if you're going to say, is it the company's problem? Yes, it is. But I think the company should be empathetic to both the man. I have 2 male video editors who both drop their children to school every morning. We have a morning call that happens mandatorily for all employees. You have to check in at 9 in the morning and do the morning editorial call. The only 2 people who are exempt from this call are the male video editors because they have written in saying, we drop our children to school. Now, I believe that this flexibility can be shown to your colleague irrespective of gender, right? I think it is to be welcomed that roles that were traditionally ascribed to women, more and more men of your generation, of my generation, are ready to chip in and do them, and that's something to be encouraged. And therefore, the more we understand that this division between work and the rest of life is not a neat little line, the more we understand that men are trapped by the same stereotypes that constrict women, the more we're going to have an honest conversation about this. But these are unacceptably large gaps. These are not acceptable in a country where we believe that women and men are on an equal footing. And so we have to really take these gaps very seriously, right? Anyone wants to add an experience, something you've observed at home, something you've observed, some of you have worked places before you've come here. Yeah?
I just have a question.
Yeah.
To kind of balance out the scale, how do you promote women in a workplace without putting men at a disadvantage? There's a lot of opportunities that you see nowadays, the only women, and how do you kind of deal with that to balance the scales going forward?
So I think one of the things to be mindful of is that there are certain roles that still remain dominated by men, right? In journalism, let's take an example, that there are many women in journalism now, but very few women who actually own companies. Very few women who actually are the editors of their company. Let's take strategic affairs. There are very few women who cover military and strategic affairs, right? So while I'm with you, that I think all that you can offer is equal opportunity, I think mindful companies, instead of being token, sort of let's put a woman as the front face of this, mindful companies should have a conscious attempt to say, why are there no women, why did no woman volunteer to do this? And let me give you an example. I do a show every evening on Mojo Story called Bottom Line with Barkha. If my producer produces the show, till I told him and her, that one female producer, one male producer, 2 producers, we would end up with all male panels. And I would say, surely there are also women who are good at this. Surely there are also, so now we have a rule, and it's not token, it's just making that effort to say, okay, if you're discussing India and China, there must be a female diplomat also that you can call. If you're discussing, okay, there's some things where that hasn't happened. Like sometimes when I'm discussing the army, we just don't have women in the infantry. They haven't come. They don't, like, there might be something very super specialized, but that change hasn't come. But in most things that we're discussing, the change has come, but it's not being reflected because women are numerically less in those roles than men. So your reflex tends to go towards the man. And I think that's the only thing that we can do, that we have to remain fair to the men. You can't be seen as giving special privileges to women. I don't agree with that. It's like if I had gone to Kargil and I had said that I want a bed, a bathroom and food, but the men can manage without it, right? But equally, so I'll give you like public transport. Let's take public transport. So we provide, we're like, okay, you can reimburse your transport bills if you go home after X time. But we offer that to both the men and the women. But we know that it might be more vulnerable for the woman to. So there will be somebody who will say, hey, did you get home? Now, in large companies, that is the model that you have to, it's still a work in progress. What is your policy that doesn't exclude men? That doesn't give women a softer standard to be measured by. I don't think any actually ambitious woman wants a softer standard, right? And yet recognizes that the reflex is bias. The reflex is to look towards the men. That's the unconscious bias. It's not even like some man is sitting there. It's the woman's reflex also. I have a female producer who will also automatically get 4 men on my show. So we have to recognize that years of conditioning has made you and me, men and women, a certain way. It traps you as much as it traps me. And we have to constantly interrogate that without creating an unequal environment where men are left behind. I don't support that. Or where women are measured by a different standard. Right? So, yeah. Can we get him a mic?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I'm Vijay. I
Hi.
feel that organizations have to sacrifice certain aspects in the shorter run so that there is a huge amount of benefit in the longer run. So for example, take an application to a leadership role. That particular application is in the proportion of the number that you displayed. 57% of the application receives are from men applied to their application. 25% is applied by women. So women and men are judged equally for that particular role and then selected. So on this, the organization has to be very conscious. Men could be judged against men and women could be judged against women, and then they can select them.
Why would you want to separate it like that?
Because if we do that right now, we are creating equal place for both men and women. And after 20 to 30 years, this number might have tilted.
I see what you're saying, but my improvement on that model would be that you say there are 5 openings in this company, and I'm going to make sure that at least 2 of these openings are taken by women, but let the women compete with the men. However, if the man is the better candidate, I'm not going to take the woman just to fill that space. And I don't think any woman here would want that.
But if that particular math works from right of the start of an organization, the number will...
But you see, you get to... So this is a big debate, right? The other big debate is period leave. I got a lot of anger from millennials and Gen Zs because I said I'm against it. And I said I'm against it because I said I'd fought all my life, you know, when I was the woman fighting to go to Kargil. If I had said, oh, but when I get my period, that's the day I won't report in the war, nobody would have taken me seriously, right? And a lot of young women got very angry with me and they said, you have no idea how excruciatingly painful it can be. It is disabling. It is whatever you have to have. And then I said, okay, why doesn't every organization have 4 days a month for both men and women to exercise the right to not come to work because they may not feel good that day, right? Because maybe a man doesn't have a period, but maybe he has something else. Maybe he has a mental health issue. Maybe he has something else. Maybe he's depressed. We don't know. I am just saying that personally, I am extremely scared of ghettoizing women and men. I don't want women in one category, men in one category. These are women's specific policies. These are men's. Let the women compete only against the women. Let the men. No. What we can be more mindful of is when we represent. Surely we all believe that if there are 5 openings, there must be 2 women as qualified as the other 3 men. Agar nahi hai, wo alag baat hai. If we go through hundreds of applicants and we say, you know what, the top 5 applicants, sorry, were men, But I just don't believe that. I don't believe that if you're mindful, you can't. I think we should be mindful about representation, but we should not separate men and women in the way that that's my view.
Got it. I mean, that's a very good explanation. You are saying that let the environment happen as it is in a meritocratic way, and over time, the numbers
But be
will
mindful
adjust.
about inclusion, because the reflex is bias. The reflex is, Geeta Gopinath told me that as the IMF, I think she was the chief economist. She went to a meeting, and there were these chairs around a table. And someone didn't recognize her, and they told her, ma'am, can you please leave that? That's for the chief economist of the IMF. Because that person did not think that the person just assumed that the chief economist of the IMF is going to be a guy. So you have to understand that bias is subconscious and you have to consciously address bias. But you cannot address bias by separating men and women. I at least personally don't believe in that.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, let's move on. Sorry. Now we said we would talk about values associated or characteristics associated with leadership. And I came up with my favorite one, which is authentic. And I'll tell you why this word means a lot to me, and I want to hear from any of you if you have comments on it. I think too many people spend too much time being some version of themselves that's not real to them. Like someone had said in the earlier half of our conversation, that you're crippled by expectations of others. So how many of us are really being ourselves? I think if you look at the most effective leaders around the world, men or women, you will find that they are uniquely themselves. You know, whether it is a Steve Jobs who came out on stage in his black t-shirt and made that somehow a template for design, you know, and then design became such a critical part of every Apple product. If you shut your eyes and you think of any leader that you've admired, you will find that there's something about them which is not a mass trait. They are unique characters. They have unique personalities, and they have not hesitated to be the authentic versions of themselves. So for me, this is really a top of the chart trait, authentic. Because people who step back from being leaders want to just kind of merge in the crowd. So they don't seek authenticity as a key value. Whereas for me, I'll tell you, I'm on camera, I've been on camera all the time, right? And one of the things I've learned about being on camera is that if you're kind of yourself, people will forgive you most things. So if you kind of say, like suppose you fumble and you say, oops, or you say, I was telling somebody, I think the other day I was interviewing Abhishek Singhvi, who's a lawyer and also in the Congress party. So he was saying something and he said that something has gone up 1000%. Okay. So I said, no, I don't think it's gone up 1000%. I think it's gone up 4 times. So he said, and obviously neither his nor my math was good, because he then looks at that and he says, 4 times means it's gone up 4000%. Now at this point, I'm thinking, surely 4 times cannot mean 4000%. So I said, sir, I think that's wrong, right? Now he said, yes, you're right, that's 400. So why am I telling you this? Because actually this is happening in a live show. It's happening in a live show. People are watching us, both pathetic people at math, trying to understand what is 1000%, what is 4 times, what does it mean, what percentage does it travel into. But we didn't cover it, we didn't edit it. Because people understand that nobody is perfect. I'm going to come to that trait later. It's actually one of my traits. But if you're willing to just be yourself, just relax, right? Just sort of don't have a filter between you and the people you're dealing with. Vulnerable. I think that there was a woman who got up earlier and spoke about her partner being driven to suicide. She stood up in a room full of maybe friends, some strangers, and spoke about a deeply personal thing. And she was the only person who got a round of applause. What did you react to? You reacted to her vulnerability. So somebody stood out in this room this morning because she shared a really traumatic part of her life, and she let herself be vulnerable in front of all of you. And without any nudging from me, you all appreciated it. You saw the power of vulnerability right there. And I apply this to communication all the time. And I'll give you an example. I curate this event called We the Women. And a few years ago, we had Alia Bhatt and her sister Shaheen Bhatt on our stage. And Shaheen Bhatt had just written a book on being depressed. And Alia Bhatt was, so the main guest was Shaheen Bhatt. And Alia Bhatt had come as this caregiver, what it means for a family member to have somebody depressed at home. And they were talking, and I said, okay, now how do I get them to drop? Like, I want people to get to know them, not to know them as stars, but to know them as human beings, which means that I have to make them comfortable enough that their mask is not worn. So I had to share something about myself. You have to be willing to offer your own vulnerability, your own flaws for people to open up to you. So they were talking about anxiety attacks. So I told them that, there was a time in my life when I would get anxiety attacks, and each time I got an anxiety attack, it would feel like a heart attack. And I told it in a slightly funny way because I can now laugh at it. But I said I would tell my driver, "Mujhe emergency le jao." And I would keep admitting myself into cardiac departments of hospitals who would then say, "You're just having a panic attack." And then I told this whole story. I told it in front of a live audience like this. And the moment I told the story of my life, which no one would have associated with someone as confident as me, that, oh my God, Barkha used to get anxiety attacks, really? But the moment I told that story, it immediately allowed both of these sisters to talk. Alia started crying. And it was suddenly, even though it was a public event, it was a safe space because I had told her something personal. And she felt ready to tell me something personal in return. And she spoke about how difficult it was for her to be a caregiver to somebody. She felt guilty about being happy because her sister was depressed. And it was a very, very real moment that had nothing to do with her stardom. So vulnerability should never be underestimated as a leadership value. Unapologetic. Somebody in the morning got up and said, this may not be big for you. I don't know. I'm not sure. Never preface your intervention with a qualification. Never preface your intervention with a disclaimer. I don't know if this really fits what you want, but. Because while there might be an empathetic listener, there might be a person with no time at the other end. And or there might be a person who's going to think, you don't even seem to believe in your own story because you've just put 8 words of doubt before it, right? You can be both vulnerable, and because I'm sure the next question will be, you just told us it's okay to be vulnerable. So I'm saying apologize for yourself and to be vulnerable are 2 different things. These are not the same things, right? Apologetic is to somehow undermine yourself. Vulnerable is, I feel terrible, this happened to me. Or I want to share something with you, this happened to me. Or I have a stammer, I have a stutter, I stand up on stage and my legs wobble. That's vulnerability. Apology is, I don't know if I look good on camera. That's apology. Vulnerability is, I have an autoimmune disease. It's 2 completely different things, right? I could be making both of those comments while I stand up on stage. Confident, it's everything. It is everything. It is the difference, and for women in particular who are self-effacing, who don't put themselves out there, who feel they will be judged when you're out there, this is everything, right? It is everything when you apply to get a place in Masters Union. It is everything when you go and try and get a job, because it conveys energy. It conveys energy, it conveys self-assurance. It is a highly attractive quality. Okay, people are drawn to confident people, either because you want to be like them or because they convey competence, they convey efficiency, right? So if you ask me, how do you acquire confidence? It links back to those other things. Just be yourself. If you're able to be authentic, your confidence will organically come because you're comfortable in your own skin. People who are not confident are not comfortable in their own skin. So authenticity and confidence are highly linked traits. Passionate. Some of us come from backgrounds where, yes, we need to work to earn money, but we don't only work to earn money, right? Otherwise, we wouldn't be here at Masters Union. We have relative privilege. Now, what are we going to do with that privilege? What are we going to do with the opportunity that we have to live and study in a place like this? Are we at least going to realize that this is a gift that maybe 95% of your country doesn't have? The option to work or study something that you're passionate about is a privilege. And it is something we take for granted because we feel, oh God, class, oh God, exam, right? I understand. I had all of those feelings myself. But while being financially independent is critical, and it is, I cannot emphasize how important it is, think that you are among the lucky 5% of this country that can build a life out of something you love. And therefore, try and find a path that takes you in a direction where you are passionate. You know, in between these sessions, I looked at my phone for an hour and a half, and there was a message on my phone saying, Amritpal, you all have heard of Amritpal? So I was in Punjab all of last week tracking him, and that Amritpal may be surrendering. And in between, like having my 2 French fries and my sandwich and whatever, I was like, oh my God, Amritpal's going to Amritpal. And I was like typing, messaging, multitasking. Why? It doesn't really matter, like if I miss a story in the larger arc of my journey, it doesn't really matter if I miss one story, right? But you know what? It matters to me. It matters to me because I love what I do so much that for me, every story is like a new story. Every story is like a new story. I'm that passionate about my work. With all of the flaws, the declining standards in journalism, my disillusionment with television, why I left television, with all of my frustrations, with all of the setbacks, with all of those things, what I feel when I am reporting a story is an unparalleled moment of passion. It is unparalleled. I love it. Like that's why I couldn't sleep, because I couldn't go to Kargil, and I couldn't sleep because I couldn't cover COVID, because I love it. And trust me, your lives will feel more fulfilled. You will be more confident. You will be more authentic. You will feel more like yourself if you're able to find something in your life that you're really passionate about. And you will emerge automatically as a leader in that space, because the fact that you love it will shine and exude out of your personality. Nobody who knows me doesn't know that I love being a reporter. I love it. Like you can just feel it in my energy, right? You have to find something you're passionate about. This is a very important word. No one is perfect. Imperfection. Every leader, the most effective, powerful man or woman will have imperfections. No one is 100% good at all times. Everyone has flaws. For those of you who have worked before you studied, you will remember immediate supervisors about whom you could say, you know, they were really good in this way. They were really fair people, but oh my God, did they have a temper? Or like, you know, they were really patient, but I found them too slow. Or whatever, you can come up with any sort of combination of characteristics. But when you apply this to yourselves, do not pursue perfection. Do not pursue perfection. It doesn't exist. Do not get obsessed with the idea of being perfect so that you get paralyzed and don't do anything. I have seen so many people say, I can't possibly do that, you know. Because, you know, when I speak, I don't know, I get my English wrong. I get my grammar wrong. Or when, you know, my voice sounds very odd when I play it back to myself. It sounds so ajeeb. Or like just anything, like any moments of doubt you have because you think that there is a certain version that is required of you. It is not required. Perfection is boring, and it is an illusion, and it doesn't exist. Right? And what everybody craves is to be accepted with your imperfections. Those imperfections can be physical, they can be personality, they can be your leadership style. There is no perfect mythological leader out there. This creature does not exist. So please do not let the idea of imperfection sort of halt you in your life journey in any way. Which takes me to my last point. You know, before we broke for lunch, we spoke about popularity and leadership not being the same thing. And I want some thoughts on that. You know, because if you think about it, there might be people you've really liked. They're in our families, in our circle of friends, but they're not leaders. You know why they're not leaders? Because they're worrying so much about being liked that they're not taking any decisions that sometimes have to be taken because those are unpopular decisions. Right? It can be, I don't know, like in my case, I'm very deadline oriented because I came from a background of television and live reporting where a 4-second delay meant you would get knocked off the rundown. You know, so the way live bulletins were stacked up, your story was supposed to arrive in at 3:04. And if your story arrived at 3:08, the editor in the production control room had moved another story up, you missed your slot. So I'm very deadline oriented. So in the digital world, obviously there isn't that sort of the new culture of people we work with, they don't take deadlines that seriously. So I get very upset. So I'm like, no, if it's 8 p.m., if we do our show every day at 5 p.m., we are going to start at 5. We are going to because that discipline can only make us feel better. Now, there are people who might say privately behind my back that, you know, what a strange woman, yeah. It doesn't really matter. No one's measuring that thing. Why does she have this principle? But I have it because I believe in it. Now, I've given you a very small, irrelevant sort of example, but what I'm trying to say is that popularity and leadership are two. If you're really lucky, you will be a much loved leader. But I cannot think of a single leader, please correct me if I'm wrong, who has not had a degree of criticism, a pushback, even dislike. And sometimes the same person can be liked for one thing, loved for one thing, and disliked for one thing. And this is the same person. So please understand that if you constantly want approval, you're never going to take decisions because there is no decision in life that makes everybody equally happy. Right? So please, you know, I want to open this up. How are you doing on time? Huh? 3 p.m. So I want to open this up in the last sort of 15-20 minutes to hear from all of you. But let's pause on this note, the difference between popularity and leadership. So think of somebody who you have not liked but you've respected. Anyone? You don't have to name the person, but has there been somebody where in that moment you haven't liked them, later you understand why they did what they did? Maybe you had to be in the same position as them, you then realized, oh, yeah, go ahead.
So I don't know if it directly relates to it, but so it's just a recollection that I have that, you know, when I was growing up, I used to watch like all these actors give interviews and they used to talk about these concepts and ideas that they were so passionate about. And I used to think that, you know, why don't they like run for office or run for this like position of power? But then I realized that they can't because they don't have like that skin in the game that because of their search for popularity. So
that's a very good example. I think it's a very apt example because there's so many movie stars who actually never reveal what they think, right? And then you will have television channels kind of skewering them, as you saw in the whole sort of Sushant Singh case, the hashtags that call for their boycott, all of that happens. But you'll never see them coming out and expressing their opinion because they're terrified of, they want to be liked by everybody.
And maybe that's why, like, even the politicians are hated. As a class, people complain about them a lot, but still people vote for them. Maybe because they're willing to take all those complaints and, you know, digest them and still work.
So, I mean, a very interesting example is probably the most popular figure from Punjab for your generation is Sidhu Moosewala. Like, I just came back from Punjab and every time I would ask somebody, who's the one person, they said, but Sidhu Moosewala contested an election, didn't win. And otherwise, why? Because people are smart and are able to separate, ye actor hai, ye musician hai, ye politician hai, people are smart, right? And I think people who are obsessed with, because their work requires it, or they think their work requires it, are obsessed with the idea of being popular. They're never going to step out and stand away from the crowd. And if you're not going to step out and stand away from the crowd, you might be very successful, you might be very loved, but you're not strictly a leader.
And yeah, one more question, this may be unrelated, but I wanted to ask, what does, like, you made your career in journalism, right? So what does a journalist lose in their journey? For example, you know, you hear that doctors become desensitized to pain and death, and people in the army or police become desensitized to violence. So what does a journalist lose in their journey?
I mean, I think my kind of journalism also runs that danger, though I haven't been desensitized. I know because of how deeply it impacts me every time I'm exposed to violence and tragedy. But I will say that our training, obviously police and army way more and doctors way more than a journalist, but because I've been in so many zones where there's been death, violence and tragedy. Your training requires you to be operationally functional at that time. You have to postpone fear, you have to postpone emotion. So that's one thing. But I think what I have lost or journalists may lose along the way is a kind of conventional idea of time. I don't have a conventional idea of time, right? I don't have an idea that this is where my work day ends and this is where my work day begins. This is now when I'm taking a holiday. So you know what? I'm going to turn my phone off. If I were in Italy and Amritpal Singh was surrendering, I would still be distracted by it because that's how I'm wired, right? I had pneumonia in December and the doctor who was treating me at Apollo, he would come to hospital for his rounds at 3 in the morning. And I heard him scolding a nurse who had forgotten to give some patient an injection, saying कि nurse बनना है ना तो ये shift का system ये भूल जाओ. ये नहीं चलता. This is the difference between life and death, right? So I think journalists lose a sense of an ordered life and lose all notion of time. Not all journalists, but journalists who are kind of crazy obsessed with what they're doing lose. And I have no sense of time. Like, I don't even know where the years have gone. I don't know where the day begins, where the day ends. Like, it all feels like one fluid journey. So, yeah. But let's come back to, here. Can we get the mic here in the middle?
Hi.
Hi.
So, would you say high agency is an important trait for leadership?
High?
High agency.
What do you mean?
So, effectively, as you mentioned, that you have an unconventional mode of, let's say, time. So, let's say deadlines is important, and that is something that you try to kind of convey to your peers and all. Similarly, let's say what I've observed in my life is that people who are kind of very, very high on kind of, let's say, getting things done, getting
high
things
agency.
across.
Yes, okay, got it.
So effectively, those are the people, rightly or wrongly, they kind of do
Move
much
ahead.
better. Now, high agency versus, let's say, prioritization. So let's say, as a leader, I would probably want to prioritize better and hence make lives of my own lives as well as people around me better. The other thing is the whole perception around somebody who's owning stuff as well as who has this high agency.
Yeah.
So I have a feeling, and my whole experience kind of says that the second people who kind of have that high urgency and agency, they kind of succeed much better as leaders and as well as otherwise.
I would agree with one caveat. And the caveat is that teams and companies need multiple kinds of leadership. And usually the kind of person you describe will be the front-facing sort of core of the company, will be the leader of the team. But you also need that other leader who has that prioritization skill, who can make the boring Excel sheet, who can say, okay, this month, this is our target. Because the person who's out there, front-facing, urgent, high energy, isn't necessarily thinking. That person doesn't say, let's get it done. I don't care how we do it. We have to get it done before. I just had that call on the way to the office here in some other context saying, there was some deadline we had to meet. And I said, I don't care, 30th April is the deadline. By the time I come back at 5 p.m., I want to see this. Now, there is another kind, that's one kind of leadership. There's another kind of leadership that is required to action my kind of leadership, which is that somebody actually has to sit there and put it into a system. मैंने बोल दिया, अब मैंने ये सोचा नहीं कि how will resources be apportioned, कितना cameraman किस project के लिए लगेगा, कितना video editor चाहिए. When you make that system, you suddenly say, listen, Barkha, it can't be done by 30th of April because you know what, we're 3 video editors short. Whatever. I'm giving you an example, right? So while I agree with you that certainly in perception, that kind of leader wins the accolades, that kind of leader conveys the energy, commands the respect. We must never forget that there are multiple kinds of leadership and there is a quieter, more structured, more structural leadership that unless you're a completely solo player, you need to action your energy.
Sure. Just one follow-up then. Basically, I have been the former type in the sense that I have been the guy who has been putting things into the system. Now I'm kind of moving into the latter type.
Okay.
And that doesn't necessarily come naturally to me. I'm somebody who kind of
So why are you doing it?
Because of everything that you mentioned. The other thing is slowly and steadily through my experience, I've realized that, okay, this is not necessarily that I dislike.
Yeah.
And I want to be at the front.
Yeah.
I want to kind of change not necessarily change my personality, but flex it.
Put yourself a little bit out there.
Put myself a little bit out there. And also I have kind of started enjoying it a little.
Yeah.
So how do you kind of, let's say, flex from one to the other? Because it's necessary, I guess. I think everybody...
See, I'll tell you, if it's not inside you, no,
yeah,
you can't generate it. Right? I'll tell you, I'll give you a personal example. Like my father and my mother. My mother was an outgoing person. My father was the most universally liked person, a brilliant man, but he was a gentle soul. So he was never going to be that type of personality. He wasn't going to be it, right? So if you can't be it, no, don't kill yourself. But if you want to be it, right? That means that it exists inside you. Because if it didn't exist inside you, you wouldn't seek it, right? So, like for example, I don't care about cars. I'm giving you a very tangential example. So people always tell me, how can you be driving in a Maruti Ertiga? I'm like, I don't care about cars. So mere andar mein I'm indifferent. But you have to answer, are you indifferent? And kind of happy being the second kind of leader? Or actually is there a part of you that really wants to be that kind of leader and you're just shy, you're closed, you're tentative, you're scared of being judged? Then you want to push yourself.
Yep. So
how do you flex? Easy. Always behave like no one's in the room. It's a very strange piece of advice, but honestly, I'm talking to all of you, but I'm not thinking, hey, what is she thinking about me right now? I'm talking to you like I'll be at home having chai.
Sure.
Right? So the point is that, and I'm not thought of it and come like that. Over the years, that's my personality. Now, what I'm trying to say is that for those who are more inhibited, the idea is to drop your filters.
Sure.
You have to drop your filters.
Sure.
You can't be emotionally closed, unrelaxed, and want people to be relaxed around you.
Yeah.
The second way of doing it is what we said in the beginning of this conversation, show, don't tell. I have these arguments so many times. Somebody will come in my team and complain, you know, that person doesn't listen to me. You have to put a system in place where that person listens to me. Partly correct. There's something weak in the system. But my answer is, why isn't that person listening to you? That means that that person either is a person who respects nobody, in which case we've hired wrong, or maybe you are not demonstrating enough organic leadership. And what that I simply mean, if people see you be really good at what you do or really working hard, they will respect you. You will not have this problem. But if you try and impose, I am your senior, please respect me, nobody's going to respect you. Because people these days are less scared about consequences. We're moving towards flatter structures. So that old style of leadership ain't going to work.
Yeah, I've been on both sides of the place there.
So then you know.
Yeah. So I think maybe just last one.
Yeah.
So essentially, I think, so as somebody who has kind of struggled with the imposter syndrome that you've talked about, for the past 4 years or 5 years, I've kind of gotten out of it, pretty much. And now, in some ways, I've tried to help others. I've kind of posed to others that, okay, I want to help with some problems that you have. Somehow, some way, what happens is I do not come across as an authentic person. And this is again
no,
being...
why? You look at you. I think you're coming across as very authentic. I don't know if you try to share this story with anyone.
I haven't. So
that's the point.
So,
goes back to vulnerability.
Yeah. But again, so I generally believe, and I've understood kind of that authenticity is a very, very intrinsic part of being, let's say, out there and being a leader. How do you kind of really inculcate that? So essentially, I have generally believed on let's say various WhatsApp groups of my, let's say, LM groups and others, I've tried to help people. I generally think that people doubt as to what is in it for him. And that is something that people doubt all the time.
But people, that you may never be... No, but that you may never be able to... You know, people, we live in such a cynical world that people will always say, why is he going out of his way to help so-and-so? Why is he going out of his way? I wouldn't... You know, I think if you're that kind of person who always wants to help people, then don't think too much about the consequences of that. Just do it because you like it. But on your leadership thing, I would just say that, you know, there's something obviously that holds you back from what you seek to be and what you're being. And I just think it's self-consciousness. And I think that you have to drop that idea that somebody's looking at you. If you are able to, like people in a different context, people always ask me, you know, when you talk to a camera, what are you talking to? Because half the time we're not talking to real people, we're just talking to a camera, right? And there's an audience. So I say I always talk to a lens like I'm talking to one person. One of the things, if you can't organically do it, is even if you're in front of 500 people, talk like you're talking to your pal at work, pal at home, or your sister, or your sibling. Talk to one person.
Cool.
Yeah?
Makes sense. Makes sense. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Coming back to the topic of popularity versus leadership, I think every kind of leadership post that you read or book, one of the most hated people in the history of the world is Hitler, but he is still essentially one of the.
He was a
he
change maker. I don't know
ticks
if I
all
use
the
word
boxes
leader.
of a great leader.
Sure. Contentious, but yeah, I'll allow the question. I'm not sure he's a leader.
Okay, and why do you think so?
Because he did not achieve anything larger than him. He destroyed things larger than him. If we take the starting point to say that a leader will achieve something larger than themselves, he destroyed and divided people. Just because you can inflict torture on people, power is not leadership. Power, see, we have to separate these nomenclatures. That Hitler had the power to be a tyrant does not make him a leader. Because what did Hitler achieve? The question you must ask yourself is, what was his achievement? And I don't think there's an answer to that. There's no achievement.
Okay.
No, you don't agree, so go ahead.
No, I think his belief of what he was doing or why he was
has
doing
no
what he was
takers in the
doing
world today.
was for his country. And that's what he believed was the greater good, to get Germany to be a great power in the world. But leaving that aside, I mean...
No, he didn't believe that. He believed one community of people were evil and should be gassed and killed. So that had nothing to do with the greatness of his nation. He wasn't somebody who killed in the course of war, right? Every general has killed or led his or her men to kill in the course of war. He consciously picked a community to eliminate. He supervised genocide. So that is not an achievement.
Got it.
But that was not your question anyway.
No,
what was your question?
I mean, changing course, I just wanted to ask that leaders have to make the tough decisions.
Yes.
And has there ever been a time where you covered a story but didn't report it? And why?
In war all the time. I have been in situations in war where you are briefed. See, I'm very clear. There are people who may not agree, and depending on which journalist you talk to, there are journalists who say, you're a journalist, not an Indian or an American or a Pakistani, whatever. I'm an Indian. I cover, my prism of looking at things is as an Indian, right? I have been multiple times in situations of war or conflict where, let's say, somebody may tell you that, listen, this information is for your understanding, but it is not to be used. Because it is a sensitive time, we're in the middle of an operation, this cannot be revealed, it's an operational detail, I can't tell you, or I'll tell you when your camera is off, you're never to report it. All the time. But no other situation.
Thank you.
No other situation. Last question, maybe? Yeah? Last question? There at the back, yes.
Hi, am I audible?
Yes.
My name is Anushresh.
Yeah.
Like you were just talking about how leaders are driven and they're motivated and they imagine like they are the only person in the room and that's how they talk. I wanted to ask from you, like, people also have to build effective feedback mechanisms. Like there have to be certain people that you have to trust.
Yes.
Who can give you like not a societal critique but an apt feedback
Absolutely.
about your personality.
Absolutely.
Because then leaders otherwise tend to get way more driven and they lose track of what is like.
You become an egotistical delusionist, yes.
Yeah. So like how do you deal with that?
No, it's a very good question, and I don't know if you were here in the first half, but I was saying that there's a difference between feedback and random criticism. That's the first thing. Secondly, to clarify, when I say talk like you're the only person in the room, I didn't mean that you don't care about effectiveness, right? What I meant was that I have noticed that people who are not comfortable public speakers, right? This is an observation. It doesn't apply to me really because I don't have that problem. But people who are not comfortable in speaking in public, they tend to see all the faces in front of them, right? And instead of being able to connect with the face, okay, hey, how about you there in the red polka dot, right? Like, and call out to them and make a connection, they get so overwhelmed by the number of people they see in the room that they freeze. So my suggestion was that talk to a room like you're talking to one person. So just want to clarify that. Not that you don't care whether you're effective. But on feedback, it's a very important point. And I think everybody needs around them. And it's the toughest thing in the world to find. People who can tell you the truth about yourselves. So in my life, for example, my closest friends, I count 5 people as my closest friends. And 3 of those 5 knew me from before I was a journalist. I went to college with them. So had I become something else, something not in the public eye, they would have loved me just the same way, right? So it's very important for everybody to have those people who, if tomorrow you lost everything that you have, they would look at you the same way. It's very important. Everybody has to go and find at least 2 people in your life who are that. Secondly, you have to find at least 2 people in your life who will tell you things about you that you don't want to hear, right? In my case, my friends tell me, you're too reactive. You'll react in the instant. You'll say, "Ha, I'm being very authentic. ठीक है, अच्छी बात है." But then you've gone and taken some decision in your life. It's done out of pure emotion. You've not even paused for 30 seconds before you've reacted. I get this feedback about myself all the time. But I will take it seriously from a person I trust to have my best interests at heart. I will not take it seriously from a troll, from some random person who doesn't like my ideology. Acha, ye to left hai ya right hai, or whatever you get boxed in as these days, right? So 2 things are very important to effective leadership. Find the people you trust who will tell you the truth about yourselves. Find the people who will respect and love you even if you were nothing tomorrow. That is critical.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I think we're kind of... 2 more? Okay, we have time for 2 more. Okay. Someone who hasn't spoken maybe? Okay, one you and then one here. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm Kashap. So I just wanted to understand from our lens, 25, 26,
Yeah.
27 olds,
Yeah.
and you talked about authentic,
Yeah.
vulnerable, unapologetic. What if in a situation or in an environment where the room and the freedom of being one of these or some of these does not exist? And let me take an example. Let's say I worked for media industry for 6 years, and sometimes there were situations where being authentic or telling that, okay, this is wrong, even telling that situation or that was not possible. And you knew that if you tell, there are options that you might be asked to leave, or your boss is very, you might come in the bad books of your boss, and your life circumstances do not allow you to quit or just be like a leader. Okay, no, I'll figure something of my own. I don't want this life.
We've all been there. We have all been there.
How do you tell us the application? Like, how should we practice it then? Because I feel these traits will come when we reach a certain height or certain level.
But I think that last thing that you've said is very important, right? I'll tell you the truth. If today, for all the points I've made, if a 21-year-old joined Mojo and came and told me, the way you do news is wrong, right? I don't think you should do it like this. And there have been cases like that, right? I'd say, okay, but show me. Don't tell me. Show me. Show me how you would have done this story in the same time and as effective, and show me that you can get people to watch it. Because if you can't, then even I would say, you know what? I think you've bought into, you have a little bit of a grandiose self-worth. So when I use these words, what I'm trying to say is, I'm not trying to advocate a scenario where you're being argumentative and you are being ideological, right? I'm not making that point. I am saying, first you learn to understand yourself. Who are you? Are you saying this to somebody because all your friends said it? Do you really think it? Are you doing this so that you can be counted in the hashtag that's on Instagram or Twitter? Do you really have a problem with it? What is your authentic self? Pehle usko dhoondo. And telling somebody who you respect, see, it's different if you don't respect the person you're talking to, right? If you don't respect the person you're working, then you do and there's no judgment in it. You say, you know what, I'm doing this to bide time. I don't respect this person. But I will adhere to the expectations of me in this work environment, and I will look for something else because this is not helping me be my authentic self. But before we get to these points where we can raise these questions, we must demonstrate capacity to be effective. All of these come only after you're good at your work. You cannot, the most annoying thing for a boss is to be told how something should be done if the person saying it has never done it themselves. Right? And I think this is a big generational clash at workspaces today, where again I would say, listen, yaar, don't give me a lecture, karke dikha do. Uske baad then you take that as a challenge and say, okay, can you give me a chance to just do this differently? 3 times I would like to do it. If I'm not effective, maybe my assumption was wrong. One of the things we didn't speak about was the willingness to unlearn. there also has to be a willingness to say sometimes, Acha, I was wrong. Right? So obviously I'm not suggesting, like, as I said, like a mutiny going into work. I'm saying first and foremost, you've got to be good at what you do. All of this comes later. But find things that you're good at. Find things that help you be your authentic self. It's not just about which office you work in. It's also about what professional space you're embracing. What you're good at is some of the toughest things for people to answer about themselves.
So I just want to understand, what is your opinion if you're put in a situation where you as a person have to be authentic, and you can, and whereas, you know, the concept says fake it till you make it.
My
What would you do?
interpretation of fake it till you make it is not necessarily that you're being fake, but what it means is you've got to show up and keep showing up and keep showing up and keep showing up if you really want to do something till you get better at it, right? For me, fake it till you make it is about persistence. Or it's about scraping your knees on the basketball court and getting up and playing basketball again. I don't see that phrase literally to mean, you know, that you're being fake. I think it means that there are days or moments when something you want to do doesn't work out the way you wanted to do it. You want to give up. Your natural instinct is, let's just leave it. But at that time, some voice in you is telling you, no, outwardly, just don't give that away. Because sometimes showing up is 90% of the battle. Just keep showing up. So I think my interpretation of that phrase is not what you're imagining. My interpretation of that phrase is don't give up. Because one day, if you keep at it, it'll feel like it's happened. Or alternatively, somewhere along the way, you may discover that you don't really want to do that thing. But in that case, you won't need, the question only will become redundant. I think this is for a context where you really want to do something and you're not succeeding. So I think we'll have to close on that note. I wish all of you the very best. I hope you had a good time. All the best with whatever you decide to do. And thank you for being such a great audience. Thank you.